Hello everyone and welcome to Anupam Tech Talk. This is day 21 of my journey towards building a stronger engineering and technology leadership skill. Today I want to talk about a skill that every software engineer needs but we do not always learn formally: how to read and understand an existing code base. When we join a new project, inherit an old application, or start working on a feature that someone else has built, the first challenge is usually not writing code into it. The first challenge is to understanding the code that already exists. And honestly, this can sometimes be more difficult than writing a new code. So, how do we approach it? Do not start by reading every file. The first mistake I see engineers make is opening the project and trying to understand everything. That's almost impossible. A large application can have hundreds or even thousands of files. Instead, start with the big picture. Ask yourself, what does the application do? What are the major components? What, where is the user interface? Where the business logic? Where does the data come from? Which API or external system does it communicate with? And how do we and how do these different components communicate with each other? Think of it like every entering a new city. You do not start by memorizing every street. First, you look at the map. The same principle applies to software. So let's find the entry point first. Once you understand the high level architecture, find the entry point. For example, in a mobile application, you might ask, where does the application start? How is the navigation handled? Where does a particular screen gets created? What happens when a user taps a button? In the backend application, you might start with which API receives the request, which controller handles it, which service processes it, and where does the data come from. Finding these entry points gives you a starting point of exploring the system. So follow the data flow. One of the most powerful technique for understanding the code base is follow the data flow. Let's say I am working on a banking application and I need to understand the account balance screen. Instead of reading hundreds of files, I start with the screen. I ask, where does this screen get the balance? Which view model or the controller provides the data? Which service is called here? Which API is responsible? How is the response transformed? And finally, how does the data reach to the UI? Now I have a complete path such as user, UI, view model, service, API, backend, response, and then finally UI. So once you understand this flow, the code base starts becoming much easier to navigate. Fourth point, understanding business logic. Another important point is that we should not focus only on the technical implementation. We also need to understand why the code exists. For example, imagine you find a piece of code that checks whether a transaction is above a particular amount. You might think, why is this condition here? Instead of immediately changing it, ask, is this a business rule? Is it related to security? Is it required by the regulatory requirements? Was it added because the previous production issue? Understanding the business reasons behind the code is extremely important because sometimes what looks like unnecessary complexity actually exists for a very good reason. Point number 5, use the tool available to you. Modern development tools can make code-based exploration much more easier. Use that. Search, code navigation, call hierarchy, debugger, logs, unit tests, integration tests, API documentation, and where appropriate AI-powered coding assistance required, use them. Instead of asking an AI tool, explain this entire application, ask smaller and more specific questions. For example, explain the data flow from this screen to the API, or where is this object created and where it is modified, or what are the dependencies of this service. So breaking the problem into smaller questions makes the exploration much more effective. Point number 6, do not assume the existing code base is wrong. This is particularly important for experienced engineers where we see code that we would not write today. Our first reactions can be sometimes be, why did someone write it this way? But before judging it, understand the context. Maybe the technology was different 5 years ago. Maybe there was a performance limitation. Maybe the team had a different requirement. Maybe the code exists because of the backward compatibility. Good engineers do not immediately judge the code. They first understand the context, then they decide whether something should be changed. Point number 7, make a smaller changes. Once you understand a small part of the system, make a smaller changes. Run the application, run the test, observe the behavior, use the debugging tools if necessary. This gives you confidence that your mental model of the system is correct. And that's an important concept. Your goal is not to understand the entire code base at once. Your goal is to gradually build an accurate mental model. The leadership perspective. Let's talk about. Now, let's talk this one step further. As engineers becomes more senior, their responsibility changes. A junior engineer might ask, can you implement this feature? A senior engineer might ask whether where should we implement this feature? And eventually a technology leader might be asking, should we change the system at all? To answer that question, you need to understand the existing system deeply. That's why the ability to read and understand the code is not just a coding skill, it's also an engineering leadership skill. Because good technical decisions come from understanding the system, the business, and the constraints behind that. So, if you're joining a new project or working with a unfamiliar code base, do not feel pressured to understand the everything immediately. Start with the big picture. Find the entry point. Follow the database. Understand the business logic. Use your development tools. Ask questions and make a small changes to validate your understanding. Remember, before you change the code, understand the system. That's why that's my thought for today. Thank you for watching Anupam Tech Talk, and I'll see you tomorrow with another lesson. And we will continue this journey building a stronger engineering and technology leadership skill. Keep learning, keep building, keep leading. Thank you.